Hi, my name is Joel Barnes. I'm a songwriter and a artist based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I lead worship from time to time, and I uh, sing songs from time to time. So that's me. When I think of elevating, I think I have two answers. Of course, there's a natural answer of like things like leveling up, right? But that's such a general statement. I think it's it would probably more so be if there's an elevating thing, like it could be elevating your mind or elevating like your body, like your perspectives, right? But I also think like being attentive to something, you elevate things by being attentive. I think if you're elevating your body, you're being attentive to your body, you're working out, you're exercising, you're eating better, you're breathing, like whatever. But if you're elevating your spirit or your heart, I think you're focusing on your internal garden. So it could be something as simple as going to therapy, or it could be trying to change a perspective that you have. I think of elevating, I think about like quite literally bettering something, bettering yourself, or I think about vantage points changing. Like when the higher you go, the different like vantage point you have. The term bird's eye view comes to mind. I think you see things from different angles. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a situation, it kind of feels overwhelming. But if you were to get a bird's eye view of what's really going on, that what was happening around you was only a little bit portion of the totality of what's happening. Sometimes it'll either encourage you or discourage you. I think I elevate my community by like giving them the information or giving them encouragement, like by reminding them that they're not alone in whatever they're feeling. I elevate my community because like sometimes people are not aware of certain things, and I think singing about truths and singing about things sometimes can bypass the shields and defenses that most people would have if they were just having a dialogue or if they were just hearing somebody talk about it. You know what I mean? Like I think when you have dialogue with someone about a conversation, they're immediately getting defensive sometimes, or they're immediately like gonna turn it off. Like I don't want to hear all of that. But somehow through music, you can tell somebody a truth, and they're willing to listen to it because the melodic pulse kind of bypasses their defense systems. They're not as like guarded, or they're not as like resistant to like hearing a truth about it. I don't know if this is a good example, but like I think Bob Marley is a very good example of that. Like there's a hard truth that comes. That was a hard truth that was happening in his time frame. He said, "My music is a road to consciousness. Like I want to make people aware of certain things that they're turning a blind eye to, or they're turning a deaf ear to, because it just doesn't. It's not palatable. But somehow music makes things palatable. So for me, I think I just want to inspire and elevate my community by giving them information or giving them truths, whether that be about the Lord, whether that be about love, relationships, friendships, heartbreak. I think I want them to know they're not alone in their dark seasons, or like, hey, here's some more information that might change the narrative, it might change the conversation, it might change your vantage point a little bit. So Joel feels most inspired. Like think I feel most inspired when I guess I'm not necessarily. I don't want to say I'm not paying attention, but I think I'm inspired by deep dialogue whenever I'm having like a conversation with somebody. I like a stimulating conversation. If I'm watching an old movie, like I'm obsessed with a movie called A Knight's Tale. It's very like ye old English, like it's about knights and stuff. Like it's like very like old, but I think the way that they talked about love back then, or the way that they talked about like life back then, like was really really interesting, especially in that movie. But I'm inspired when I hear things that kind of like make me think or make me see the world differently. So I'll watch interviews or like a J. Cole, or I'll watch a certain Mix-a-Lot interview. Like I'm always inspired whenever I hear something that or feel or sense something that is like, oh wow, that's a great perspective, or no, that's something that needs to be discussed, or that needs to be talked about, like that needs to be shared. That's something that everyone needs to hear, because you're used to hearing all the chaotic spots about like whatever the topic is, whether that be about the music industry or whatever, because everybody's talking and not many people are listening. I like to like listen to people to see where they're at. So I think I'm inspired in a bunch of different ways. I fully believe in rest for sure. Like I fully believe in resting. Like, and rest isn't necessarily like limited to sleep. Like rest is doing anything that one revives you or regenerates your like what you've poured out, but also like it's not limited to sleep. I think it's you for me. Like I'll go play basketball with my homies, or I'll play video games with my brothers, or I'll like listen to a podcast, or I'll sit in my room and watch a TV show like that doesn't require a lot of attention. Like I'll watch Jamie Foxx show or How I Met Your Mother or whatever. And I think like sometimes like I'm an introvert that has extroverted tendencies whenever I'm showing up for people, but I'm okay like sitting in my room by myself sometimes and just kind of like decompressing and whatever. Like I I think is really really important. It's really really important. Sitting alone with the Lord or whatever, working on a craft, pulling on my laptop, working on a song by myself. Like I think it's all really important. So that's how I prioritize. Or I have a tradition after I do any tour or something like major like that. I always like treat myself to like a trip to Universal and ride roller coaster. I moved to where I am in Atlanta because of community. Like I moved because of the community that's here. Like to be attached to like my mentor, my spiritual father, and like the community. Like it's really really important. I think some of the best songs come out of community because I think we are by design communal people. We're made for community. Like we need people around because if it's just us and no one else, or if we're surrounded by people with just all the same perspectives, all the same thoughts, you're not going to inspire and impact anyone. You need to be around people that like sometimes challenge like your thoughts or your perspectives sometimes, because I think like the Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. Like it's all necessary. So communities played a very big part in this. Like everything that you're gonna hear from this album came from me like being a part of the community I'm in. Like it's all like um, a bunch of the different things that we've been like discussing or hearing or talking about, or it's made its way through our community some way somehow. So I think anything in this album will be like it will be from the language of my community. Like we we did this. It's not just a me thing. I'm a product of good leadership and good community. So my song Altar is quite literally about that. It's about like altars and altar calls and stuff. Like I think it's the perfect single because it it talks about like what this album is as a whole. Um, this album is basically one massive altar made up of a bunch of different like records. To give you the backstory, like I think when I was a kid, I grew up in church and I hated altar calls. I hated altar calls really bad because it always felt like a walk of shame. No matter who was walking down, person that we never met or one of my cousins, because I grew up in a family church too. So like my aunt and uncle are still the pastors of the church back there in Kentucky, and my cousin's still the pastor. My mom still goes there. Like my cousin's still on the usher board. Like I'm I grew up in a family church, but I hated altar calls because every time someone walked down to the altar or whatever, it always felt like a walk of shame. Like, oh, that they backslid again, or oh, they struggling, or oh, and it's like sometimes I would overhear them, like the people talking about them, and I'm just like, nobody wants to do this. People's hearts are pounding because not because they're expecting change, but their hearts are pounding when they walk down because they know that everyone in this building is about to look at them and you can cut the tension with a knife. Like, I'm like, I hate this. Like, God, this can't be how you designed the altar to be. And then God started talking to me. He's like, well, why don't you go back in scripture and find out what the altar is first mentioned in? Noah steps off the ark and he builds an altar to the Lord. And he says that God, anytime I remember where you brought me from, this is after the flood and everything. Anytime I remember how you delivered me and my family, I'm going to come to this space right here, this place of dirt, this stack of stones, and I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to make sacrifice, and I'm going to honor you, and I'm going to like show my gratitude. And God was like, the original context of an altar was a meeting place with the Lord. Later on, it turned into, once you go through like Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Like once you go later on, it became about the sacrifice for the remission of sin, or the sacrifice for any kind of like mishaps or mess ups, or any. It became for the cleansing and the, like remission. Like, but the first original context and like construct of an altar was to meet with the Lord. So then you go through, which is interesting. I'm going through the Bible app now, like going through like the entire Bible, and it's like once you get into like the New Testament and the crucifixion, like the it talks about how the veil was torn from the top to bottom. Now the veil being like thick, it was like, I want to say 6 inches thick. You can't just tear that easily. The veil was supposed to represent separation between God and man, because the Ark of the Covenant was behind the veil. And it's like, if you lived a spotless life for a year, you go behind the veil, all the things, yada yada yada. But the veil being torn was supposed to represent there's no longer any more separation between God and man. You no longer have to like travel for miles and miles and miles to get to this designated spot to meet with the Lord. Now the altar can be anywhere and everywhere. Like, the cleansing is now for past, present, and future. So now the altar was then transformed into or transcended into anything. Now your living room couch can be your altar. Now your kitchen sink can be your altar. Now your dining room table can be your altar. Like, God will meet with you anywhere. Your bedside can be your altar. Even your song can now be an altar that you can use to meet with the Lord anywhere and everywhere that you are. And I think it's important to sing about this truth, so that like there's no longer any more separation between God and man, and God can literally meet you quite literally anywhere that you are. Because some people fight to get out of bed, and they think that they have to get to the four walls of a church for God to meet with them. And I'm like, if anything that pandemic taught us is that God will meet us in our households. We don't have to necessarily like rush to a church building to meet with the Lord. Like, God will meet us right there in our bedrooms, right there in our living rooms, right there in our bathrooms, in our showers, in our sinks, behind our steering wheels in our car. Like, God is not bound to the four walls of a building. So I'm really grateful to RCA Provident for allowing me to like sing about these truths. They're the ones that took a chance on me. So I'm grateful. Forever Dreamer is like my company, my brand, my like the the overall umbrella of like what I wanted to do, because I think I've been that guy that's had dreams, and I'm still that guy that has dreams. I think that God is a dreamer, and I think that he gave us the ability to dream for things. But I think sometimes I've been having this conversation for the last 48 hours, but I think growing up, most of the time we're taught to dream within reasonable expectations or within parameters. Like, our parents put parameters on how big we could dream. It starts small. It starts with the kid standing on top of a coffee table, believing that he's Superman, and then their parents get mad and tell them to get down and act like they got some sense. Dream within your limitations. Dream within your parameters. And then it grows as time grows on, to where when they're thinking about what they want to do as far as a career, or they're thinking about what they want to do in their life as an adult, most of the time their parents have been grooming them to like go to college, get a degree, and dream within what's safe. But the people that dream within what's safe never do anything to change the world. Most of the men that are like that have done some significant things, and men and women that have done significant things, they were able to dream past the parameters, and they were able to dream for something that was a lot bigger than them. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny to think about it, but it's like, you think about like Apple, Google, Microsoft, like all of that stuff was started in people's garages by people that never even went to college. Like, they just were dreaming for something. And I think Forever Dreamer was started because I'm like, I know there are other people that are like me, that are believing for something, they're dreaming for something. They might have promises that God has made them, and nobody around them understands. Their parents, their peers, their cousins, their whatever, like their communities don't understand. And it's like, but you're responsible for stewarding the dream because God gave it to you. They're not responsible for it. He gave it to you. Your people around you aren't responsible for it. And a lot of times dreams, you can't see them until you make them come alive. So you're trying to get people to buy into something that they can't physically see or touch or taste in the moment. But it's like, it takes so much time to get some dreams off the ground. Jim Carrey said the funniest man he knew was his father. His father worked for a Fortune 500 company for years, 40 years, I want to say. And right when he was about to retire, the company went bankrupt and shut down. So he lost all of his pension. He lost all of his retirement. He lost everything that he had built his life on for the last 40 years. So on his deathbed, he looks at Jim Carrey. Young Jim Carrey says, if you want to be a comedian, you have to take the chance. Because I'm living proof that you could fail at something you hate. Everybody's afraid of chasing their dreams because they're afraid to fail at something that they love. At the end of your life, you're going to regret not chasing what you loved. And you can fail at something you hate too. So I think it's important, like, to create a space for dreamers to like take the risk and chance. You know what I mean? I have friends of mine that are from like Nigerian culture or whatever, and all these different walks of life. And a lot of times, people are telling them, you need to play it safe. You need to become a lawyer, become a doctor, become a dentist, become something safe, something that's like guaranteed to have longevity. In music, that's not a guarantee. In fashion, that's not a guarantee. Like, that's not a real job, is what they say. And I'm just like, yeah, but like, if Mozart had like took the chance, we wouldn't have the amazing music that was created there. You know what I'm saying? If Michelangelo wouldn't have taken the chance, we wouldn't have the Sistine Chapel. Like, there are certain things that have to be done, even though like you don't really have a grid for them. You might not even have a map for them. You don't even know how to get there, but you have to take the chance. You got to take the risk. So Forever Dreamer was designed to give people a chance and to inspire people to take a chance on the dreams that they have and that they're sitting with, even if no one else around them understands. Like, you gotta go for it because it's your life. You have to live it. Your parents, they might not understand now, but when it works, they'll respect you. They'll respect you for it. Your friends and your siblings might not understand. They might envy you because you're chasing something that they wanted to chase, but they just didn't have the courage to do so. But later on, it'll inspire them to take the leap. So that's the whole point of Forever Dreamer. I always lean towards trusting the Lord with all your heart. Lean not into your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. I lean on it because trusting God is the most beautifully terrifying thing you can ever do. Your natural inclination is to lean on your understanding. Lean on what you know. In the unknown, lean on what you know, like, to do. And I think it's important for me to be inspired and be encouraged because it helps me recognize my dependency on God. I would tell you right now with full confidence, anything and everything that's in my life right now that has been beautiful and blossoming, I didn't do with my own hands. God orchestrated it. He opened the doors. He put the connection. He put me in the right place at the right time. Like, every room that I've walked in, God, like, He escorted me into. Like, I didn't kick the door down. I didn't fight and scratch and claw my way into the room. Like, He strategically put me in the right place at the right time. It's like one thing connected and landed with another. And it's beautifully terrifying because when you get to see a lot of beautiful things in life. You get to have some of the best views to some of the best conversations or some of the craziest moments in history. But it's terrifying because you don't know where the next thing is coming from. A lot of times you're like, okay, Lord, like, what, some things are consistent, but some things aren't. And on the days that they're not consistent, you have to like remember, like, oh, I didn't get myself here, so it's not my job to sustain myself here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I came from a space where I first moved to Covington to Atlanta, and I had $100 to my name. I was on an air mattress in a 2-bedroom house with a complete stranger because I never met my roommate at the time, and I was at the bottom. And then out of nowhere in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, a song that I had written and been a part of kind of like sweeps the nation. And I'm like, how in the world did this happen? Mind you, the song came from me being snuck into a writing camp that I wasn't invited to. I wasn't even supposed to be at. But God ushered me into the room. And I'm like, I have to remember in those times, like, where God brought me from and how He set the stage and He orchestrated the things. So whenever things are chaotic or they're not going the way I thought that they would, I lean on what I do know about the Lord, not what I know about myself. Like, I lean on what I know about Him, and I acknowledge Him every step of the way. I try to live an integrated life, not an interruptible one. I used to want to live an interruptible one. I used to be like, God, I'm gonna live my life, and whenever you want to interrupt me and tap me on the shoulder and invite me away to something, I got you. You can interrupt me at any point. And then one of my people looked at me and said, that's great, but if you live an integratable life, you'll never have to live an interruptible one. If you acknowledge Him in what you choosing to wear today, if you acknowledge Him when you're like, okay, what do you want to write about today, or where do I go today, what direction do I go in to get to where I'm trying to go today? Because if you acknowledge Him in everything that you do, it seems a little like interesting and weird at first, but after a while you get used to it, and then you start to realize like He cares about the little things and where you're going, and He starts to direct your path. He starts to like weave things into your story that you never would have even known were that important or that special. So that's what I That's the scripture that I lean on to like always be encouraged. Like no matter where this thing goes, everything's gonna work out. Everything's gonna be okay. Anyway, this is Joel Barnes, and you are tuned into Elevate.